be alive in this land of ours. Good to drive in this land of ours.
Hello, Canada hockey fans in the United States.
The Hockey Time Machine.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to Hockey Time Machine. I'm Glenn Dreyfus. 25 years ago next month, the Whalers played their final game in Hartford. No one would have predicted then that the Whalers would be the Van Gogh of sports franchises. Underappreciated then, beloved now. Later on, we'll hear from Whalers founding owner Howard Baldwin, and in just a couple of minutes, the guy who saw Hartford's NHL years from beginning to end, Chuck Caton. But we begin with the man who wrote the book on the franchise. Pat Pickens is the author of The Whalers, The Rise, Fall, and Enduring Mystique of New England's second greatest NHL franchise. Pat, thank you very much for joining us.
Always happy to be here, Glenn. Thanks for having me.
In the book, you describe the Hurricanes' 2006 Stanley Cup parade if it had happened in Hartford and not Raleigh, North Carolina. I mean, Pat, why? Why did you have to rip the heart out of the Hartford fans reading this book right from the very beginning?
Yeah, right from the opening face off of the book, huh? Yeah, no, I think it was important to imagine that because, the irony is there was a parade in Hartford, and it was happened in 1986 after the Whalers fell just short of qualifying for the conference finals. So the city threw the team a parade, but I think what was remarkable is just sort of, I think it was just the imagery of it. It just sort of to take people back to the fact that here was this also ran team that sort of, like you referred to it as, sort of not beloved when they existed, not really, they were sort of, they were there. And then to sort of, see how they've come all these years later, but then also sort of to imagine it, because you mentioned, the franchise did win a championship, and there aren't too many organizations that leave their former homes and then win a championship that quickly. It was 9 years from when they moved out to when there was the Stanley Cup, the only championship still in franchise history. And I think to bring forth the imagery and to bring forth to just sort of imagine, this if things had been a little bit different, this would have happened in Hartford. This very well could have and perhaps should have happened in Hartford instead of the parade that happened in Raleigh, North Carolina. So I think it was, again, to sort of, it was one of those things that I really wanted to start with that imagery because, again, no one would have ever thought of a parade in Hartford for a championship because they only threw the one parade when it was after the second round. And yet here we are in 2006, the franchise won the championship. And I thought it was a good way to start to sort of imagine if that team had a few breaks here and there and changed, maybe it would have happened in Hartford.
Pat, we're going to beg your indulgence. Stand by for just a minute because we want to interrupt to bring in a Hall of Famer. We are honored to be joined by, as we said, a Hockey Hall of Famer and a former Whaler, Mark Howe. And Mark, I know how busy you are, so thank you for making a few minutes for us.
Oh, no, glad to, Glenn. So, it's always fun to talk about the Whale.
So to start, what brought the Howe family from Houston to Hartford?
Well, it's quite simple. Two people, Howard Baldwin and my mother. They got together and And the best thing about it, as you look back, was Howard. By the Whalers signing the family, it gave Gordy a chance to continue his career on the ice. So Dad ended up getting 3 more years out of his career, and for me, it was 3 more years of opportunity and playing on his wing for a couple of years. So it was a huge bonus for me as well.
Because the story was supposedly the Boston Bruins were after you, right? So what tipped the scales toward the Whalers?
Uh, Being able to have Dad on the ice. So I know as a young kid growing up, everybody dreams of playing in the National Hockey League and winning the Stanley Cup. I mean, there's no bigger goal than that if you're a hockey player. And that was my dream. I wanted to get to the NHL. I had Dad retired. Chances are I might have been a Boston Bruin. Boston actually gave me a really good 5-year offer. Harry Sinnet. I spoke with Harry a number of times. But I said, it's not going to be on my resume that I was the reason Gordie Howe retired. So, but no, you look back and, I've been very fortunate with all the wonderful things that happened to me over my career, people I met, places I played, wonderful owners. But there's no memory that comes close to playing on the same team as my father. And like I said, Dad either played center or right wing, and I was the left winger on his line. And I benefited for 6 years before I became a defenseman. And so it gave me 3 more years of playing on the same team with arguably the greatest hockey player in the world.
And your mom, as you mentioned, quite the negotiator, wasn't she?
Oh yeah, she was. So and Mom was all about family, and I remember I was in my townhome in Houston when the negotiations were going on when we were leaving the Arrows, and I expressed my opinion of wanting to go to the NHL and wanting to be able to compete for a Stanley Cup. And I was still a young age of 22. She said, "You're going to get your chance." She said, "It's going to happen, but you're not going to have an opportunity to continue the history of what we had done down in Houston, playing on the same line with your father." And that was it. Once she put that into my head, I said, "Yeah, without a doubt, you're correct. You're right." So we'll let the other stuff be on hold for a while. But I said, I think with a lot of people, I know with myself, the older you get, you have a different perspective of things on life. And without a doubt, that was by far the best decision I ever made. And we've always been about family. That's how my mother and father brought us all up. I think it would have been extremely selfish of me that had I left and only looked after my own needs and wants and gone to Boston. So and Hartford was great. I spent 5 years there. It's a beautiful community. Took pride in playing for the team, and things changed. You moved on, but yeah, like I said, I got plus it gave me a couple more years with my brother Marty. But a lot of brothers play together with us. We played together every year since I was like 4. It's only 1 year we didn't play together till I was like 25 or 26. So yeah, it gave me a couple more years with Marty as well.
Well, your decision is rewarded a couple of years later in an additional way because Hartford joins the NHL, and you and your dad and Marty for a few games as well, you all get to play together with the Whalers in the National Hockey League. So how much did that all mean to you and to your dad especially?
I don't know. I just for Dad, just to like I said, he turned 52 years of age that year, and I think he still had 37 or 38 points. And I always said Nick Futillo, I think, had 10 goals playing on Dad's left wing, so that's how good Gordie Howe was at the age of 52. But no, Dad just loved to play. He loved the game. He loved everything about it, and so he got to continue his dream there. And for me, merging into the NHL is. I finally got to where I wanted to be. The 4 teams survived the WHA and got in. And, in Hartford, we only lost 1 or 2 players, I think, in the expansion draft or in the draft. But I really felt bad for Edmonton and especially Winnipeg because Winnipeg was a heck of a team. I think they ended up losing 9 or 10 players in the draft. They went back to the NHL teams that owned their rights. So and actually, so once it came out of the whole deal, I think the Whalers were probably the best team of the 4 that got into the NHL that year. Only I think mostly by default.
Now about Mark Howe. You had a bunch of hat tricks in the WHA, but your one and only NHL hat trick came in a Whalers sweater. It was opening night, 1980, in St. Louis. What do you remember about that game?
Well, as an old WHA goalie, Mike Liut, they gave it to me. So yeah, my timing was bad. I had a couple of hat tricks during exhibition season, but what I remember the most about that game, I know I had 3 goals. I think I had two assists, but what I remember the most is we lost. We lost, I think it was 6-5. And that's what the game's about. It's not about individual stats. It's about winning and losing. And, we had some good hockey players on that team. Blaine Stout was a heck of a sniper, great goal scorer. Mike Rogers was a big time player. And, we had a lot of guys that chipped in. It gave me the chance to, like I said, we had Gordie Howe, we had Dave Keon, we had Johnny McKenzie. I think at the end of the year we added Bobby Hull. I don't know if it was that year or the year after. And wow, what an opportunity to play on the same team with those guys as well. And, as a young kid, those are the people I looked up to. And now you're in the same locker room. You're out sweating together and stuff. And so, yeah, Hartford provided a lot of great opportunities for me.
Well, for the record, that wasn't just any old hat trick. 2 things about it. One, you scored all 3 goals in the same period, the second period. And 2 of those 3 goals you scored shorthanded. So that was quite a notable accomplishment.
Yeah, I don't know. I was used to scoring shorthanded goals. I don't know. I know in Philly, I think I had 8 or 9 or whatever one year. And I remember in the old WHA, we were playing against Indianapolis, and I think I had 2 goals, and I hit the post all in the same penalty kill. So I almost had a hat trick shorthanded. So, yeah, even though I always thought the game mostly defensive, but I knew when the opportunity was to try to create offense. And every once in a while, if the team's on a power play, the odd guy tends to relax a little bit, which gives you a little bit more opportunity to provide offense. So, but like I said, the biggest memory, the thing I remember the most is we lost that hockey game. So that's when you have a great individual night, it's just a lot more rewarding if your team wins.
You mentioned the Flyers, and unfortunately, the Whalers have a history of not so good trades. And one of the not so goodest was sending you to Philadelphia. I mean, good for you. You had 10 great years there. Good for the Flyers, not so good for the Whalers.
I don't know. It was when we first went to Hartford. I had a note. My mom had negotiated no trade contracts, and things changed over time. So Dad had retired. Marty was being switched back and forth between the minors. Actually, he was out on loan to the Boston Bruins one year, just so the Whalers could save a little money. And then with me, actually, I think the best year I ever had in my hockey career was year 2 of the merger. I was in the top 10 in scoring, and the team was in 8th place, 9th place overall in the league. All things were going, and then I had a horrible injury. I went into the net and I got skewered, and that changed basically my life. It changed the direction of my career. When I came back, and so the night I got hurt, I remember I weighed in. I was 192 pounds that night. When I tried to play a game 6 weeks later, actually we played against Philadelphia in Philly, I was 171 pounds, weak as a noodle. And, things weren't back then what they are now. I would have never been allowed to play different thing. But as most athletes, you want to get back, you want to help your team. And so what happened, I think within a year's time, and I wasn't happy with my play. I know I wasn't playing very well, but I was trying. But the coaches and some of the management people at that time were disgruntled. They they didn't agree with my assessment of how I was, and I was still only 178 pounds the next season, and they had a Canada Cup that year. I went and played up in Montreal for the USA, and I was terrible. I was so bad they had me on left wing for a while, and I came back, and it wasn't until the end of that next year that I started to feel better. But by then, bad feelings had happened between, like I said, some of the management, and then Howard tried to step in, try to help out, and I didn't like the way Marty was being handled. So I mean, that's the negative thing about playing with a family member. And with me, I went in. I more or less kind of forced their hand. I asked for a trade. They said they wouldn't trade me. I said, no, you'll trade me. And it was time. I think had I not had that injury, I probably still would have been a Whaler. But things, fate changed things, and I was able to go to Philadelphia, and I guess people looked at me differently when I got to Philly, and I was still under the Gordie Howe name, I think in the Hartford area. But once I got to Philly, they just looked at me as a player. They looked at me as Mark Howe, and so I think I got looked at a little differently as well.
Let me ask you lastly about when you were inducted into the Hall of Fame, and there's a really sweet moment when your dad gets to see you put on a certain sweater. Will you tell me about that moment and what you remember about it?
Yeah, that's easy. Yeah, so like during my induction to the Hall of Fame, obviously you don't get there without so much help from so many people. And for me, like without a doubt, there's no way in the world I'd ever be in the Hockey Hall of Fame had it not been for all the things my mother did, especially when I was younger. Marty and I would probably never played. I mean, all the hours she put in and stuff, but mom had already passed and dad was there. And so I spent the last 3 years of my career playing in Detroit. And anybody knew Gordie? Gordie never asked for a thing ever. But I think it was about 6 weeks after I retired, he said to me, he said, "Man, I wish you would have worn my jersey one day." And I'm like, "Oh my God, Dad, it's a little bit late now." And then I think it was 16 years later, I got into the Hockey Hall of Fame. And by far, even the easiest and the first thought that came to my head was, I'm going to get a chance to, do what Gordie had one of his wishes. So, so I went out. I bought a Red Wing jersey with the number 9 on it, and I saved it for that day. And I figured, to me, that was by far the best tribute I could give my father. So he carried me along on his left wing. Like I said, for 6 years. So, but yeah, like I said, it's. Like I always teach my kids, it's not about you. So it wasn't about me. It was about my teammates, my coaches, the organizations, but most of all, it was about my family. And like I said, I wanted to make sure I gave my mom her due respect. And obviously the best thing I could do is my father's put on that jersey and shake his hand. It was a great moment.
Mark, it's been a great moment for us that you made time for us. We kept you longer than we promised we would. I really do appreciate that you did make time for us this evening. Thank you.
No, glad to help out, Glenn. So and for Pat and for Chuck and Howard, please say hello and enjoy the chat. And I got to tell you too. So Marty and I rode in the NHL at the Macy's parade years ago on their float, and they were debating what they wanted us to wear. So they had me wear a Flyers hoodie, and they were trying to get Marty to wear something. Well, Marty put on the Hartford Whaler, the old Hartford Whaler hoodie, and all through New York City, I'll guarantee I got a lot of booze. Marty got so many cheers and applause and everything for his uniform and those colors. I mean, it's still so popular to this day.
Okay, so you have to indulge me for one more question.
Yeah.
Pat calls it the Whalers mystique. 25 years later, can you explain it?
No, I can't. I mean, I wish I could, but Hey, I like the colors too. I mean, the uniform was cool, was awesome. The city was good, but I don't know. Maybe it's because they had something and they let it get away. Maybe that's the mystique of it all. If it was still there, I don't I don't know if it would be that popular, but it's one of those things that, hey, I had it, and maybe it didn't work out right, and it got away from me. Maybe that's what it is.
Very good. As good as explanation as any.
Yeah, no, it's worth a shot in the dark. So what the heck?
Thank you, Mark, very much. We appreciate your time.
Okay, Glenn, you too. Thank you. Bye-bye.
All right. If we can bring Pat Pickens back in and thank him for standing by. Pat, thank you for letting us squeeze Mark Howe in ahead of you.
Are you kidding? I would have stayed for 20 more minutes of that if had be. It's like I got to talk to Mark Howe, and it was honestly, I think one of the greatest I would say treats of this entire book is listening to Gordie Howe stories, and no one knows more Gordie Howe stories certainly than Mark. So I think that was a real treat. I was just sitting back here, laughing at just awestruck by listening to Mark Howe talk. I always love listening to him talk.
It is so great that a Hall of Famer like that, yet he makes time for us on a program like this and time for the book. We're very much indebted. But along with the mystique, you also talk about the rise of the Whalers. Let's talk about that first. The Whalers joined the WHA in 1972, and it's really a magical first season.
Yeah, it was remarkable because what turned me onto this story that a lot of people didn't necessarily know was there's a really impressive or incredible narrative arc in the history of the Whalers. Like you said, with that first season, they sort of catch lightning in a bottle. They have, Jack Kelly running the program, and they're splitting their games between Boston Garden and Matthews Arena, and Howard Baldwin talks about how they were the first in everything. They won their division, they won the championship, they were first in revenue, they were first in attendance, and they thought that the good days would continue to ride forever. And it was a matter of they had some really incredible. Larry Plow had a hat trick in the championship game, and it was a game on national TV, and they were. But the funny thing is that they're playing in Boston. So few people realize the history of the Whalers started in Boston, and they're playing essentially fourth fiddle behind obviously the Bruins, who were Stanley Cup contenders in the early 70s, great teams with obviously Bobby Orr and Phil Esposito and some of the all-time greats, and Jerry Cheevers at goal, who actually wrote the foreword for the book. And they're behind the Boston Braves, and they're behind the Celtics obviously, and they're behind the Circus, which is outdraws the Whalers in that first year too, or in those with those first few days in Boston, and yet they're persevering, and the fact that they were a championship team in that first year was pretty incredible, because so I guess somebody had to be, but their entrance into the WHA was sort of they weren't certainly on the first in line. Certainly their ownership group was not the first in line to get a team as it pertains to who they were, and Howard Baldwin, people might know who he is now, but they didn't know him necessarily. I mean, they had known him through his work with the Flyers organization and with Ed Snyder to some degree, but it was a magical first year, and I think Howard talks often about how he didn't appreciate it, which is, to me, is pretty remarkable. You look back at it, it's just sort of one of those things that you have this exceptional year in your first year. I think he said it was like winning the Oscar on his first film. You didn't necessarily appreciate it or understand what it meant until you get their run through the WHA, where they were a playoff team every year, and they had these sort of premature exits. But that first year they won the whole thing.
Well, staying with the WHA years, as you mentioned, the team relocates to Hartford, and then the roof caves in.
Yes.
Literally.
Yes.
That was a curse, but strangely, in a way, it turned out to also be kind of a blessing.
Yeah, I think that was one of the crazy things to learn from talking to Howard Baldwin was to tell the whole story was January of 1978, and and the Whalers were out of town. There was a basketball game. UConn played UMass the night before, and at 4:19 a.m. Overnight, that the roof collapsed, and fortunately there was nobody in there, nobody injured, nobody killed, fortunately. And I talked to Mike Rogers, and to hear him talk about how, and to get the sense of how fearful he was, away from the team. I think they were in Western Canada, and while the All-Star game was also going on, it was just to sort of give you a sense of what the WHA what was happening there. It was this fear, because the WHA was this wild west of leagues where teams folded mid-season. They would move mid-season. Nothing was really, it sounds so unique when you think about where we are in 2022 with how established and buttoned up and first class all of these organizations were. And yet you think about maverick leagues like the AFL and WHA and the ABA, and that it wouldn't have been unheard of. Wouldn't have been. No, I don't think too many people would have batted an eye if the Whalers said, okay, our building collapsed, we're going to close up shop. And yet, Howard springs to action. He gets them the building in Springfield. They had played about a year and a half in Springfield while the Civic Center was being completed on their way from Boston to Hartford. And the corporate community in Hartford realized the importance of the Whalers and what it did for the self-esteem, and also sort of tourism dollars, and sort of could see that the NHL was on the horizon potentially. And Howard tells it, and it's remarkable to me to learn that Hartford wouldn't have had an NHL caliber building if not for the roof collapse, because 10,507 seats was the capacity of the Hartford Civic Center as it was built, as it was opened in 1975. And the roof collapse mandated upgrades. And again, the corporate community, Hartford's big industry is insurance. So there were people at Aetna, people at Cigna, people at really high profile insurance industry who said, people like Don Conrad, who later became a partial owner of the team. And to the point where he said, we're going to fund this renovation, and we're going to add 5,000 seats, and we're going to add luxury boxes, and we're going to give you this state-of-the-art pristine roof that will never collapse under the weight of ice and snow and New England weather again. And again, the team moves to Springfield and plays, into the NHL days even, and they get fan support. People talk about the lack of fan support in terms of the Whalers, and about how there was indifference or ambivalence in the region. And yet here were these people, they call it the I-91 Club, because there were hundreds of people who would go, 30 miles. The 30 miles is not that far, but to go 30 miles up the road to Springfield, Massachusetts to support the New England Whalers, it was a big deal. And again, that was that moment could have been, spelled the end of the franchise. And yet it was the catalyst for them ultimately, getting acceptance into the NHL with a 15,000 seat arena comparable with the other NHL rinks at the time.
Very, very good stuff, Pat. We're going to ask your indulgence to stand by once more, then we'll bring you back in a few minutes. But right now, we want to welcome in a man who has a plaque in the broadcasting wing of the Hockey Hall of Fame, Chuck Caton. And the reason why he's a Hall of Famer can be summed up in one audio clip. So, Chuck, before we have you speak, we want you to listen to this, the dying seconds of overtime of a Whalers game in Minnesota. And everybody listen to how beautifully Chuck prepares his listeners for what might happen. And then it does.
It's off to the right of John Casey, so the Whalers will get the last chance to win the game in basketball fashion. 4.4 seconds is an eternity in this game. There was enough time last night for Falloon, who was at the right point, to knock it down between his skates, line it up, and let it fly, and he beat Andre Ratsiko with still 0.3 of a second remaining on the clock. So the Whalers, if Craven can get this draw back to Zelansky, they'll be in business. He does. He kicked it to him in a wrist shot, blocked the rebound. He scores! They score! And it was hacked in there by Adam Burt. It appeared. 1.1 second to go. The Whalers win it. Zalewski took the shot. It bounced in the slot. Burt was spun around, and it got hacked up on the glove side as he was spun around, and he blindly hacked it, and Adam Burt wins the game. Unbelievable.
Well, gentlemen, Nostradamus. Chuck Caton. Hi, Chuck.
How you doing, Glenn? Yeah, that was a great memory. I could still picture the play at the Met Center in Bloomington, and it was incredible. And it couldn't happen to a nicer guy either. Adam Burt was just a terrific individual, great character guy. Probably had the least amount of body fat of any player in the NHL at that time. I think it was about 2%. So he was always in great shape, and he was a clean liver, and it got on him. It was a wonderful moment. And if you notice the date, we don't get too many February 29th in the world every 4 years. So that was special in itself.
Okay, well, first Mark Howe's talking about all the weight he lost, and now you're talking about Adam Burt and his low body fat. I cannot relate to any of that. So
Neither can I. Yeah.
But what I can relate to is there's a longer version of that clip where you spend time talking about a game, not a Whalers game, where there was also an end of game face-off win and a late score. And it was such a beautiful job of letting the fans know, hey, 4 seconds, stuff can happen. And then it did. And how rewarding is that?
Well, it is, and I think that's the part of broadcasting that I enjoyed the most, is giving historical perspectives to people on the game. And I think that's the biggest thing for me, is that giving people a little idea, being up on things. I mean, it's a lot easier today, certainly, than back it was in 1992, because you did a lot of research by reading rather than watching a lot of games. Today, you have so much information thrown at you from different directions that it's easy to do the research if you care to know a little bit about the history of the game. And so that's what I think was the most important thing, is to try to relate it. And I guess Pat Falloon of the San Jose Sharks did me a favor by doing it the night before. And so again, and I guess more than ever, I think you could say that hockey is a 60-minute game or 65-minute game if you're going into overtime, and you better be ready for every second of it.
You're there for the very first NHL game in Whalers history. Now, they come off a 4-game road trip to start the season without a victory. So what I want to know is, what do you recall about that very first NHL game against the Kings in Hartford?
Well, you're talking about the game in Springfield Civic Center, 79, my first year?
There you go, with Springfield. That's right.
Yeah, well, there were a couple of milestones. First of all, for me, the first broadcast I ever did was an exhibition game against Pittsburgh. And speaking of Mark Howe, his dad was my color man. And having grown up in Detroit and idolizing Gordie Howe as I had, that was a special thrill for me. But that the first game at the Springfield Civic Center, I believe it was a 7-3 win by the Whalers over the LA Kings. Bob Berry was the coach of the Kings, and of course Don Blackburn was the Whalers coach. And it was a terrific game. And if I'm not mistaken, in that game, Mark Howe had a couple of goals in that game as well. It was just one of those things that, and it electrified the crowd. I heard Pat talking a little bit about, and rightly so, about how fate did play a positive in that roof collapse in '78. Because he's right. The Whalers would have never gotten an NHL franchise unless there was a commitment to build a new building with a 10,500 seat arena at that time. So expanding it as they did. But in Springfield, you got to remember, there were only something like 7,800 seats. And most nights it was packed with that 91 club, the people coming up I-91, which was a wonderful promotion envisioned by our late marketing director, the late Bill Barnes. And it was fantastic to see that many people enjoy that game. But it was a big win against the Kings, as I recall that day.
You mentioned Gordie Howe, 79-80 was his final season. And if I recall correctly, you actually got to know Gordie away from the rink. Is that right?
Yeah, I would say that we, again, right from the first day that I walked into the Bolton Ice Palace in Bolton, Connecticut for the first practice as a 27-year-old first-year NHL broadcaster who grew up watching Mr. Hockey and who went to the game as an 11-year-old kid when he tied Rocket Richard for goals in the National Hockey League with his 544th. I had to twist my dad's arm to see that game, and he said, it's real expensive to get to that game, and I don't think we can get a ticket. I said, well, I'll go. Let's go standing room only. And it was a real large sum of $1.50 to get standing room at the old Detroit Olympia. So I don't know. I don't know how much money my dad made back in those days, but it was expensive to go to NHL games even back then. But to get to know Mr. Howe as well as I did was just fantastic. After his career, I think some of the biggest thrills for me was that game in January of '80 when we went into Joe Louis Arena and Mark, Marty, and Gordy started against the Red Wings that day with the opening faceoff, house down, and then to get to know him off the ice after he retired that year. He stayed in the organization. He did a between period feature with me called Gordie Howe Talks Hockey. And again, we became very good friends. And I have to credit my wife, Mary, and a great deal of our relationship because she would make the best clam chowder and the best apple pies. And Mr. Howe always enjoyed those. And even after he moved back to Detroit and actually lived in Mark's house toward the end of his life, taking care of Colleen, my wife would make pies for him in the day. We'd visit him in the Detroit area because, as I said, I was from there. We were coming up to visit my mom and sister, and I'd always go out to lunch with Gordy, even in the latter years. So we did become very close, and obviously I was heartbroken when he passed away 7 years ago. It's still something that I think about quite often, and to be there at the time to mourn him, as many did in Detroit, was something special. And I just got some great memories of him. Such a classy person, just a wonderful individual. One of the best people I ever met in the game, obviously. And it's something how, Glenn, these superstar players are some of the best people you'll ever meet.
Did he ever give you an elbow?
Yeah, that's a good story. As I told you, my first broadcast was in September of '79, that exhibition game against Pittsburgh, and he did not play that game on opening night of the preseason. And I got an elbow. I walk up to my seat in the Springfield Civic Center radio booth, and then he comes walking in about 5 minutes before the game. I never even had a chance to kind of prep him about doing the game. But boy, I was on cloud nine, and the first thing he did was throw a right elbow at me just to loosen me up a little bit, because I'd have to say I was a little nervous sitting next to him. And he was just terrific. I mean, I got really two good memories about broadcasting with him that night against Pittsburgh, where I think we had to shut his mic off about 15 times when the hitting got spirited, because he would act like he was on the ice. Sometimes there would be some expletives coming out of his mouth because he was, even though he wasn't in the lineup, he was feeling the pain of some of the players as they were making their hits in the game. And then one night in Danvers, Massachusetts, we played a preseason game against the Boston Bruins. Ray Neufeld of the Whalers, I think, was a rookie that season, and Gordy came up and did the game with me. Again, unfortunately, the mic wasn't muted out because I was just there engineering my own game, and his mic was open, and Neufeld got run from behind by Brian Curran. And Gordy said a few choice things that I think the FCC wouldn't approve of today. Well, maybe they would approve of it today. They didn't approve of it then. But it was a chuckle. I started laughing. I lost it after hit that son of a. Then you can fill in the blank. And it was right on the air. It was terrific.
And what we've also learned tonight is that the way to Mr. Hockey's heart is through his stomach.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'd have to say that. Yeah, he was just a great guy to be around. I mean, every time we would get together, both on and off the ice, like I said, I'd visit him in Detroit every summer after he moved back up there. I've been to his house in Traverse City. and I gotten very close to him, and it was almost a surrealistic relationship because here we are, a kid growing up in Detroit watching your superstar hero, and all of a sudden real life kind of clicks in, and you meet this person, you get to know them very well, and you find out that and then you meet his sons. I mean, Mark and Marty are very good friends of mine. Murray is a good friend of mine, and it's just a terrific family. And it's like being on cloud nine. I sometimes I still pinch myself to say, wow, did I really know Gordie Howe that well, and he knew me that well? It still boggles my mind because he was such a classy man.
Well, as we mentioned, both Mr. Howe and Mr. Caton are in the Hockey Hall of Fame. So the question then is, when has a hockey broadcaster really made it? Well, not by winning the Foster Hewitt Award, which Chuck did in 2004. No, sir. It's when one of your broadcasting buddies, in this case, John Forsland, performs an imitation of you on NHL Network. As John would say, here it is.
Well, let me tell you, I used to go there all the time. Back in the ooh-la-la days, of course, with many of the Rangers. I'm not going to say they were there that night because, as you know, they were playing the next night, and they would never do anything like that back in the day. But, I have charisma, and when I go out, people kind of gravitate towards me, and I thought I saw Barry Becker. Couldn't it be him? I thought I saw Bobby Duquet. Couldn't be him. Was Espo there, though? Who's in the... That's not Dave Maloney, is it? No. Dave's getting himself mentally prepared. Sailors are at the Garden the next night. Anyway, I'm here. Hello there, sugar. Whalers, and then Andy Warhol is nearby. It's not a pretty scene, and good thing it's too late for any of us to remember that evening what happened the next day, but as they say, those were the days.
Well, he's got a second career because he's got a comedy act in Seattle the way they've been playing right now. So he's great. So yeah, I guess I never heard that before. I heard about it at Studio 54. I thought John was 6 years old when that thing was going on, Joe Namath. But yeah, it's well, I guess it's the sincerest form of flattery, but I guess Johnny's in the right division, being in Vegas. He's going to play there about 4 times a year.
Yeah. So did you have a habit of calling the ladies sugar?
No, I think he made all of that stuff was made up. I don't know where I was a great impromptu situation. I think he was talking to Don LaGreca or something, a New York station or something, wasn't it? I think I heard about it. But no, he everything he must have done was so extemporaneous and creative that I don't think I could duplicate that. It's crazy. But yeah, I knew him for many, many years when he was doing Springfield games, and then he came to the organization in 1991, and he's carved himself a wonderful career himself. So it's good to see that he would be part of this program. And again, I'll be helping selling tickets to appearance in Vegas at the Bellagio,
or maybe the Chuckle Hut.
I don't know. We'll see. I'd like to own one of those places. Just
before we get into any more trouble, let's get Pat Pickens to rejoin us to discuss all things Whalers. Mm-hmm. And so I've got a survey for both of you, 5 questions, no right or wrong answers, just opinions, but I'd like to have you back up what you say. So here is question 1. The Cooperalls that Hartford wore for 1 season, love them or lose them? Pat, you go first.
I'm going to say lose them because as the Whalers, it's funny, the book didn't mention the Cooperalls because there was a lot of other stuff going on. And frankly, I hate the look, and I hate, a lot of people want to talk about the look, and obviously I think Chuck can discuss it better than I can. But as somebody who's watched hockey with the traditional pants, with the traditional socks, with the, growing up with the traditional uniforms. I'm all for, innovation and trying things and being creative, but I think that's a terrible look, I'd say.
Yeah, I think I have to agree with Pat on that. It was unique, and if you know the history of it, I think it was the 82-83 season, but both Philadelphia and Hartford had those, and the link between Howard Baldwin and Ed Snyder, the late Ed Snyder, the owner of the Flyers. Howard used to be the ticket manager of the Flyers years ago, so they had a very special relationship over the years. So, in fact, it even went into the television world because Prism New England was started because Prism in Philadelphia. The telecasts were kind of married to each other, and they shared programming and that type of thing. So, no, I would have to agree with Pat. Lose it.
Okay. Question 2, and this comes from the Whalers' 1976 exhibition victory against Tretiak and the Soviet national team. So watch the clip, but also listen.
Tommy Earl coming in, shoot, score! And the Whalers lead it 2-0.
Here's the question. Brass Bonanza, toe tapper or too tinny? Chuck, we'll let you go first.
Okay, I'm going to go first this time. I love it. The more people that hate that song, the more I love it because it was a signature. It's one of the most innovative things that you ever had in hockey, and that's another thing I have to credit Bill Barnes for and George Ducharme and all the people that came up with this signature theme song. In fact, when I got the job coming out of Madison, Wisconsin with the Badgers, the first thing I was told by a guy named Tom Ossington, who was the Blue Line Club president of the Badgers, he said he had spent some time in New England. And he says, the first thing you're going to love is their theme song. And he tried to sing it to me. And I thought, well, I'll just wait to hear it for myself. But I love it. Because the more people hate it, the more I loved it. And I think it was played a record 12 times one night against the Philadelphia Flyers, and it drove Mike Emmerich crazy when he was doing the games. He never forgot it. I think he put it in his book as well. So now I got to go for it. And the other thing they were innovative on, by the way, was teen stores. Whalers were the first one. Pat can attest that. I've been too much time. Pat, what do you think?
I love it. I can't get enough of it. I'm glad you brought up George Ducharme because I got to speak with him to get his whole tale, and there's a whole tale in the book about how he unearthed Brass Bonanza, Evening Beat as it is originally known. And it's funny. I was in Raleigh for Whalers Night this past January. And to see, I didn't get to go, I didn't get to see Brass Bonanza at the Civic Center. So, but to hear it played after Hurricanes goals on Whalers Night and to look at the crowd and to watch them clap along and stand and cheer along, I got taken back. I suspect it went to essentially what a time machine and what, people in the 70s and people in the 80s and what all the Whalers fans and all the Whalers organization saw all those years, because it was just this sort of raucous, but also like clapping along and cheering. And I think that what's funny, I talked to Barry Melrose, and to Chuck's point where he just said, the more people hate it, he said he would go into that the games against the Whalers and he would hear that song and he knew he had to fight Al Hangsleven that night. And it added this sort of moment where it's like, oh no, not only do I have to listen to this god-awful, in his opinion, a god-awful song, but he also was going to have to fight, one of the toughest guys in the NHL at the time, or WHA at the time. So I agree. I love it. Can't get enough of it. Love hearing it, and honestly love seeing goals scored where the song is playing in the background. I think that's pretty special.
All right, Pat, you've led us into question 3 because the Carolina Hurricanes have held a pair of Whalers nights, wore the uniform, played Brass Bonanza, sold merchandise in the team stores. So the question is, tasteful tribute or tasteless cash grab? Pat?
I might be a little biased because the members of the organization, of the Hurricanes organization, have been quite good to me in terms of access, in terms of, there's a portion in the, I'm going to say, yes, I'm good with it now because I'll say my first reaction to it was that it would be the tasteless cash grab. But I think what's remarkable and how my opinion has changed is, again, sort of being down there, but again, talking to people like John Forsland, who would have said that it was a tasteless cash grab until they saw what went on in that first one, the first Whalers night, where Ron Francis had input into what uniforms they wore, and that they donated money to Bob Crawford's rink, or that there's a lot of Connecticut, New England transplants in Raleigh, in the Triangle region, that essentially went south. And it's their sort of way of hanging on to that. I mean, they become Hurricanes fans, and it's essentially like what the organization did. It migrated south, like a transplant in some degree. And I think there's obviously mixed reviews when you talk to fans, when you talk to people in Raleigh aren't necessarily ecstatic about it either. But I think Whalers fans and the Booster Club in Hartford, they talk about how it's how this team lives on, and it lives on through Brass Bonanza, it lives on through the jerseys, and it lives on through the logo, and it lives on through our stories of the team, Chuck's stories and Mark Howe's stories, and all the people who live this, and the incredible alumni base. And I think I'm not sure how I feel about Colorado wearing Quebec's jersey, or if other teams had took the opportunity to do that. But I think there's a special place for, and that this is for one night a year where the players love it, and the fans enjoy it, and it's that we start talking about the Whalers again, and how unique of a pro hockey team from Hartford, Connecticut. I think that's why I'm okay with it.
My opinion is completely the opposite. You've got to fact check Pat on this. Ron Francis was already fired before the first Whalers night. Did he have input on the uniform? I mean,
as far as I was told, yes, he was still the general when they started the ball rolling with Tom Dundon. That's what I was told. So, but I mean, yeah, you were.
Well, okay, I'll give you maybe, but I still think at first it was a cash grab. I do agree with Pat and probably people who think it's a positive that it does keep the memory. I also think it kind of rubs some fans the wrong way in Hartford. So I think that's up, but it's not up to me. If people enjoy it, that's what it's all about. That's what sports is all about. But for me, especially the first year, I think that under the circumstances that have occurred since, that it can't be a Whalers night without some of your key Whalers people. And for me, number one would be Ron Francis. Number two would be Skip Cunningham, who was there at the time, the longtime trainer who was with the organization from day one. So I guess I'm a little biased the other way. Let's put it that way.
I don't have a dog in this fight, but I kind of come down that I don't care whether you dress up in a tuxedo and you play a waltz. If you're dancing on someone else's grave, it's kind of tasteless. I don't care how tastefully you try to make it. If the Hurricanes had more of their own identity, they wouldn't have needed to borrow the Whalers. So that's kind of where I come down on that. But like you guys, no one asked me. So we'll move on.
Well, there's one thing. They did ask me, and I gave it an emphatic no that first year. That's all I'll tell you.
Good for you.